Dan Cohen, thank you for joining me. Can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Of course. First, thank you for having me. My name is Dan Cohen. I'm a journalist and filmmaker. I'm the founder of Uncaptured Media, and I made the documentary film Killing Gaza with Max Blumenthal, and I've made another film about Haiti called Another Vision, and I'm working on a new film about Palestine, Jerusalem, the war on Gaza.
So, one of the reasons why you sort of came into my viewfinder, I suppose, is because you spend really quite a bit of time in Gaza. And as you probably are very much aware, there is really quite a bit of talk about what happens to Jews when they go to Gaza. And I might have heard you in an interview say something like, well, as you can see, I was not thrown uh, from a roof, which is, I think, one of the stories that sort of gets repeated. And could you tell me a bit of the experience of coming to Gaza for the first time and how you came to that?
The first time I was in Gaza was in 2014 during the 51-day war. In the summer of 2014, there was a 5-day temporary ceasefire during the war. And myself and Max Blumenthal, who I was beginning to work with at the time, we managed to obtain press cards from the Israeli government, which is necessary to enter Gaza and exit from Israel. And it's not easy to obtain those, but we managed to do that. And we went into Gaza during the ceasefire and documented everything we could, um, seeing the neighborhoods, Shujaiya, Hosea, Beit Hanun, that had been subjected to very brutal attacks and were large swaths of which were destroyed. And at that point, because it was a temporary ceasefire, people were coming back from the shelters and the schools where they had been living amid the bombing to see their homes destroyed, find out who had survived, who hadn't. And so I stayed. Max left. I stayed um, through the end of the ceasefire. There was a few more days of uh, Israeli war on Gaza, and then the final ceasefire happened. And I was based in the country, so I just decided I'm gonna spend as much time in Gaza as possible. Um, and I really liked being in Gaza more than anywhere else. I felt like it was you could see the truth in Gaza. There were no lies in Gaza. In Ramallah, for example, it's this sort of everyone calls it like a bubble. You can live kind of a Western life. There's bars and alcohol and everything. There's Mexican food and things like that. You know, um, and so Gaza, it's just it, that doesn't really exist. I mean, there's restaurants, there's things, but it's a much more you're in like a big ghetto. There are drones over your head all the time. It's just a different reality. So I really liked being there. Also, I was treated very well. People were very friendly. That nobody ever had a problem with me as a foreigner. Um,
And you were
um,
Jewish?
I never hid the fact that I was Jewish, but I didn't, I'm generally not like very observant. So I'm not like wearing a kippah on my head. But my name is Dan Cohen, which is an extremely Jewish name and is a very also Israeli name. So any Palestinian who knows what's going on around them understands, anybody, pretty much everyone knows that Dan Cohen probably Jewish, but nobody cared. Um, I didn't go out of my way to tell people most of the time. There were a couple instances um, where I did tell people because I was sort of, I wanted to push back against this whole notion that the conflict is about, just hatred for Jews as Jews. The Palestinians hate Jews. And I just knew obviously that that was false. And so there were a couple instances where we met people who we kind of connected with, a friend of mine at the time. And I connected with people, and we asked them, "I'm Jewish. What do you think about that? I'm just curious." And I never had any kind of negative reaction. And it was we talked to some younger, like teenagers, 15, 16 years old, who are poor and working, pulling scrap metal from destroyed buildings. So people who have never met Jews, or the only Jews they've ever seen are soldiers, maybe. And then I asked older men too, who worked in Israel for years. So they said, "Oh, it reminded them of the good times when they used to be around Israelis." Now, I distinguish, it's very important, I think, to distinguish between Jew and Israeli, and this is, these are not the same thing. But nonetheless, I never encountered hatred or antipathy or anything because of my religious background, not even the
Interesting, because
slightest bit.
a couple of months ago, I talked to Sarah Katz, who you might have heard of or not, but she's a French activist. She's now in her 70s. Daughter, I mean, also a name like Dan Cohen. Martin Gack would not necessarily pass for a Jew, but Dan Cohen, Sarah Katz, I think pretty much you would think that they're an old couple from Brooklyn kind of thing. Uh, and she pretty much describes very much what you're talking about. Somebody she was quite open about who she was. And one of the things that is striking is not that she says that people were particularly open. Is that there was no conspicuous friendliness. What she describes is people quite simply didn't care. It was treated just well, and people were friendly, and people were very hospitable, and so on. How long in total did you live in Gaza?
Over a period of almost 3 years, I was in Gaza for about 7 months. I would go for 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time, sometime for 1 week, and different seasons, different periods.
Can you describe a bit of what the life is like or was like in Gaza back then?
Right, right. I mean, when I review footage that I shot back then, and I think of how different it is now, it's like a completely different reality. But um, I mean, back then, there was sort of a duality to it because you had incredible culture and really like salt of the earth people um, who they weren't. I just didn't see people as like corrupted in their hearts and in their minds the way that you might see like certainly among Israelis in Ramallah. You kind of see that even of course at the political level. I just really connected with Gaza, and uh, it was for one thing, it was a huge amount of children. So, more than half the population was children, and so there are just children everywhere. And, sometimes children can kind of drive you crazy, and they're loud, and they're shouting in your face, and how are you? How are you? How are this stuff, and but it's like it's just so characteristic of of Gaza, and I don't know, it's just it just really like I had good friends there. Um, it was a very small place. It's all, very built up, very dense. The for lack of a better term, border areas, which are the border is actually, with Israel. They're just armistice lines back from the like 1950s. Um, those are beautiful areas. It's this beautiful farmland up against this series of fences and pillboxes and observation towers. But you would meet farmers out there who are braving the land. Not only men, women too, like grandmothers who are, picking arugula under in the crosshairs of some sniper, some 19-year-old kid who's ready to kill them at any moment. So it was just this incredibly dystopian reality, but it was also such a beautiful place. And I grew to just really love it.
What 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 was it like? I mean, what was your day like, or what were this months like? I mean, friendships and like the social fabric. There is a lot of talk, and I mean, I am somebody that has crossed the world following my stomach, really. That so I mean, Gaza is very well known for great gastronomic, I mean, great cooking and great like food and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it very much had its own unique culture. Even the accent of the Arabic was spoken. You could I mean, I'm not like I was never anywhere near fluent in Arabic, but you could, pick up on differences. Um, so yeah, the food culture was the gastronomy was amazing. There's a lot of spicy food. There's food from the sea, that you're not going to see like around Jerusalem, for example. Um, there is the best hummus I ever had was in Gaza. There was a restaurant I went to one time that I have I recently dug through it in my phone and found it, and I'm sure it's bombed now. It's probably destroyed, which is heartbreaking. But the food was incredible. Uh, okay, here's something I just found recently. I came across an interview I did with a released Qassam fighter on the day of his release. We just happened to be driving by Erez crossing in the north, which goes from Israel into Gaza, and the Qassam brigades were there receiving their the prisoner. And we filmed and we followed them to Jabalia, and they're in their white trucks in all their uniforms, and uh and we go, and the prisoner reunites with his
I
mother.
imagine you're identified as press.
Yes, yeah.
You're doing this.
um
Okay.
yeah. um I mean, it's clear I'm a foreigner. It's pretty obvious I'm a foreigner. Yeah, and I'm with some Palestinian colleagues, and we go to he go the Qassam Al-Qassam brings the prisoner home. He greets his mother, which is very emotional. I think he had been in prison for at least 12 years, maybe more. Um, he had children. I think his wife was pregnant with their second child when he went to prison. And he went to his father's grave, who had just passed away recently. And then afterwards, we interviewed him. And a friend of mine who actually conducted the interview asked him, people say, you got out of one prison and now you're in a bigger prison. What do you say about that? And he gave a really profound answer. And he said, um, anybody who has been inside the Israeli prison would never say this because, yes, the situation in Gaza is difficult. Yes, we are under occupation. Yes, we're under blockade and siege. But in Gaza, there is family. In Gaza, there is food. In Gaza, you can move around inside. This is every, you can find pleasures in life that every prisoner would dreams of all the time, to have these little pleasures of life. And he said, it should never be called, Gaza should never be called a prison. And so I thought that was very profound in terms of appreciating what Gaza is. Despite the conditions it was subjected to, they had carved out this tiny bit of sovereignty, this tiny space where they decided their own affairs. They decided, do we build an armed resistance or not? What do we do? It's like those are the truths that I found in Gaza that I really that I couldn't find anywhere else.
You were still on the ground as the first ceasefire in 2014 came to an end.
Yes, yes, I was. It was a 5-day ceasefire, and it was like, well, do we stay? Do we go? And I decided to stay, and I figured, well, if I need to just stay in my hotel all the time, if it's too dangerous, then I'll just stay in the hotel. And if it's okay to go out, then I'll go out. And you don't
Where were you
exactly know.
based? Were you based in Gaza City or?
Yeah, in Gaza City, near the port, there were a few hotels there. That the foreign journalists would stay in. And so, ostensibly the Israelis would not bomb the hotel full of foreign journalists. That's kind of the assumption. So that was a relatively safe place. And there were, of course, there was a massacre of the infamous massacre of the Bakr boys, The boys playing
Oh, so we're
soccer.
playing football. Were
Exactly.
you there?
I was not there. I was not in Gaza at that point. That was before I came. But that was directly in front of the hotel, right outside it. Um, so you're never far from anything, even if you were in the hotel. But I didn't stay in the hotel much. And at that point, a lot of the destruction had already been carried out. Sijaiya had already been obliterated. Beit Hanun, these areas had already been hit. It was the last several days of the war when it resumed. And what Israel was doing was actually taking out the big towers in Gaza City, not far from where I was. And that was, very shocking for me witnessing, I'm in one tower on the seventh or eighth floor, and I'm watching less than a kilometer away Israel bomb 13-story towers that are purely civilian. This is not a military compound, um, uh, and just obliterate these towers. And what I understood was this was a message to do this at the very end, when actually the final ceasefire, the terms were already agreed upon. It was imminent. That's when Israel unleashed its biggest wave of destruction, its most spectacular destruction. That was a message, an unmistakable message that this is where it will resume when it does. And we all knew it would resume at some point. You don't know when. And, I mean, when I think about now, not only everything has been obliterated, but they took special focus, especially again in the last days of the genocide, to destroy Gaza City and those towers as much as possible because you can house a lot of people in there.
How how did this, if at all, shape your further view of Israel and the Zionist project?
I mean, in those days, I simply just understood it from a kind of universalist perspective of, uh, my identity, my background is not very relevant here. This is a state committing atrocities. At first, I was especially motivated in a way by Israel saying it's the Jewish state, and I was lied to as a young person growing up that this is my second country or whatever. I have some relationship, some special relationship with this country on the other side of the world. Um, and I felt like I was lied to, and that we were told, oh, it's a safe place and it's a liberal democracy, and all of these things. And I just felt like I was lied to. So that motivated me for some period of time. But eventually, I'm not trying to convince the community I grew up in. It's a waste of
Is that a
time.
break, or
I'm sorry?
is that a break? I mean, would you say that it's no
Uh,
longer relevant to you, or
Yeah, eventually I just, people are going to think what they're going to think. I'm thinking, I started to think bigger. Like, I'm not making a video to take home to show to my family and my friends and, this kind of thing and to convince them. I can't be oriented around what the community that I come from thinks about this issue. If they change their mind, great. If they don't, that's their own thing. But I want to have more impact than that. Um, but it really wasn't until actually October 7th that I took a deeper dive. Uh, I mean, it's a process that had started before with the film I'm working on, in terms of understanding the relationship between Judaism, the religion of Judaism, and Zionism. And that really accelerated in a big way after October 7th. And I came to understand, particularly through the work of Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he lives in Brooklyn. He's based in Brooklyn. He's a brilliant scholar, regardless of religion or anything. He's a very brilliant scholar of Zionism, and he's also you know he's of course an expert on Judaism. And the thing is, what I think a lot of secular people, secular Jews, struggle with or miss is they oppose Zionism, but they don't know how to correctly diagnose or describe it because it is Zionism is first and foremost it is an imposter ideology. It claims to be Jewish, but in fact it is ideologically the complete opposite, the exact opposite of Judaism, and that is by design because the Zionists thought uh, Jews are responsible for anti-Semitism. Jews are weak, cowardly. They adopted all of the anti-Semitic attitudes that were prevalent in Europe at the time in the 19th century. And they said, we are going to be the exact opposite. They had the same beliefs about Jews as the anti-Semites, about the Jewish religion. They said, so we're going to become the exact opposite. Jabotinsky wrote about this. Herzl wrote
Jacob
about
himself wrote about it.
yeah, how Jews are the enemy and should be treated like an enemy. He wrote about this stuff. So that is, so that's like was really kind of a revelation for me, understanding that they are polar opposites. It's like kosher pork. This is what Zionism is.
I
It
use
doesn't.
that term. I use that term very often.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Like it doesn't make a bit of sense. And most people, most secular critics of Israel, especially secular Jews, don't understand that. And that doesn't mean you have to be religious. I don't lead a religious lifestyle, but from a purely objective academic perspective, that's true. So, and I think it's an essential point that you don't really hear enough.
There is clearly a question as to the hijacking of Judaism as an ideology. I mean, and being in Germany, one of the things that you see is that the Israelis actually are essentially offering the Germans the kosher certificate,
Right.
for what, for all extents and purposes, is indeed pork. Not just metaphorically very often, but this being Germany, of course, literally as well. And it's quite interesting to hear that, in fact, I mean, in some way the question of Judaism comes back to you. So you just to get you back to what you were saying, after October the 7th, this became a question for you.
Yeah, because I've been working on this documentary for years about Zionist activity at the Al-Aqsa compound, at what Jews know as the Temple Mount, and there's a big sign that hangs at the entrance of where at the Moroccan gate where Jews enter and where tourists enter that says it is forbidden by the chief rabbi of Israel to go up there. So what are these Jews doing? Um, so uh, to understand that phenomenon explains the whole thing. That is a microcosm of the whole thing. That for Jews to go to the Temple Mount is like, again, it's like eating pork on the holiest day on Yom Kippur. Like it's crazy. So what are these Jews trying to do, and why are they doing it? What's motivating them? And some of them even wear kippahs. They wear, they are religious. So what is going on here? And that question is what I really, after October 7th, strove to understand in a deeper way. And really, it just comes down to what is the definition of Zionism. And I think that the vast majority of people who are against Israel, who are very critical of Israel, who call themselves even anti-Zionists, cannot give an accurate definition of Zionism. They think it is you support Israel, and that is not it. That just means you're pro-Israel. Um, Zionism, the definition of Zionism is that Judaism is a nationality. And so you can have different strains of nationalism. You have liberal nationalism, from the French Revolution and these kinds of things. You have the right-wing form of nationalism, like Italian fascism and these kinds of things. And you see these different forms of nationalism play out in Zionism. And they all kind of form as wires in a cable. They're interwoven to make this single thing called Zionism. And that's the key thing. So if you understand that, there are people who will say Zionism is genocidal, and that's true, and they will say it's racist and all these things, but they don't understand that it is fake. That is the thing. First and foremost, it is fake. It is someone saying, um, you know, it is a group of nationalists claiming to be a religion. And the secular Zionists, they use the Jewish religion as a mythology in the same way that, Greeks, many Greeks would see Zeus like a national mythology, or like Scandinavians and Thor and these kinds of things. It's just, you don't actually have to believe in it, it's just part of your national heritage. That's the secular Zionists. The religious Zionists are saying, no, 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 this isn't mythology. This is true. This is the word of God. This is so you can't go against it. Even there's no room for compromise at all. And that's really what it is. So for me, it's like if we don't have the basic definition of Zionism, then we're not going to be able to understand why is Israel doing what it's doing in all these kinds of things. So just like if you don't understand 1 + 1 = 2, then when you try to do advanced calculus, all of your equations are going to be incorrect.
So how, having lived there and having had friends, perhaps still having friends there, how do you live? What was it like this last 2 years for you?
Um, I mean, of course, it's been extraordinarily painful and tormenting, and just watching, like so many of us have, a genocide through a smartphone. It's it's like the most alienating experience possible. Um, and I've gone through, I think probably like many people, ups and downs where for the first month I didn't sleep more than maybe 4 hours per night. Um, and I was doing everything possible to, fight in the media and social media and all these things. I went through a period of maybe you could call depression, sort of, where it becomes like, you wake up every morning and the first thing you look at is pictures of children, with their parts blown off and their guts open. It has an impact on you psychologically, and then all of the other demands of my
You're a
life.
father as well, right?
Right, exactly. So yeah, and every time I have a 5-year-old daughter, and it's like, I'm putting her shoes on, and I imagine the photo that I just saw of a father holding just the legs of his child, or I'm playing with my daughter and holding her, and I'm imagining being that father in Gaza, walking down the street aimlessly with my child's dead, and I know many people have this kind of thing, and I think that's a normal response to these horrors. Um, I so I had to take steps back. I do that from time to time, where go outside, go for a walk, exercise, whatever it is, and you feel guilty, but it's just you have to take care of yourself, and so it was a very different thing than like in 2014. Of course, the scale is completely different, but where I was experiencing it in many ways as a journalist on the ground, and I went to document it and these kinds of things. Journalism really kept me sane. Um, you know, uh, Writing articles, exposés, investigations, these kept me.
Gives you a bit of, I guess, clinical distance.
It gives you distance, and you feel like you're doing what you can to push back, to expose the lies underpinning the whole thing. And, I had an investigation in like January of 2024 showing how from the very beginning, the days after October 7th, Netanyahu was waging this like psychological and information war against the families of the captives, of the Israeli captives in Gaza, the hostages. And he saw them as a complete enemy and did everything to try to subvert them and conquer them. And to me, everyone in the media, in the mainstream, is talking about the hostages, how terrible Hamas is. We just want the hostages back. And meanwhile, the number one enemy of the hostages, the captives, and is Netanyahu, the same guy who doesn't want a ceasefire. So, those kinds of things. doing that, then I could like push back. But just watching on my smartphone was like, I got to a point even, in the last few months of the genocide where I'm like, me tweeting doesn't make a difference. Watching videos of massacres doesn't make a difference. And I got to a point, and I really firmly believe um, we're basically wasting our time with social media. Um, it becomes a substitute for meaningful action. It's the X is a military program. This is not like, Elon Musk may be the owner, but it's a military program, and they have fake actors and all kinds of people in place to control the narrative. So people never figure out on X that Zionism is fake.
But I would say, arguably, a lot of
Mhm.
the pushback that has resulted in things like the Sumud flotilla, the previous flotilla, the Madeleine, the people in the streets of Italy, the people in the streets of Spain,
Mhm.
stopping the cycling episode. These were things that also happened by virtue of people connecting in social media and being exposed to things that otherwise they would have been kept completely in the dark.
Yes, that's true. I'm not saying it's an all or nothing thing. What I would argue is that we need that, um, but we need to have social media that is our own domain, that we are in control of, not we are entering the national security state's matrix where we have certain things that are promoted and certain things, accounts that are restricted and you'll never see them. And, you have national security state actors pretending to be real. And I think there are people, infiltrating the pro-Palestine movement, if we can call it that, um, to promote anti-Semitism, which of course feeds Zionism. They want to discredit being pro-Palestine or critical of Israel as anti-Semitic. And so I think that became very, very big on X in particular. And that's not to say that, Facebook groups and all of these things don't have a use, but I think those things need to be uh, taken, and we need to find alternative ways to corporate social media to organize ourselves, to share information. And that's and that's not only in the case of the Palestine movement, but any kind of social movement that's resisting or against some sort of matrix of control. When we are forced to use their technology and be inside their arena, we will inevitably lose.
Do you still have contact or friends in Gaza that you have kept up during the war, during the genocide?
Yes, yeah, there are a few people I'm in touch with pretty regularly. The friends I had when I was there, most of them left. Um, in large part, almost all of them left. In large part, a lot of them were, they spoke English, they were younger, educated. So, these are not like farmers who are, never going to leave their land. And these are people who, are were easier for me to relate to. So they left. They went to other countries. They went to Europe or the US or Australia and built their lives there. However, there are friends I had who were still there. One of them managed to get out of Gaza. I was my following on X actually. We crowdfunded to raise the tens of thousands of dollars to get her out of Gaza. Her and her husband and two children. There's another guy. We got out of Gaza, which I'm proud of that in the sense that we were able to save lives and help people um, and I don't mean myself. All I did was, put a few posts on social media, but people actually, donated. So, um, and there's a few journalists I'm in touch with in Gaza who I've actually never met. My friends, they left, but it's like a new generation that was there.
Dan Cohen, I thank you very, very, very much. It is really it is really great to hear your work. I mean, it's pretty fantastic to watch. So I invite people to actually do that.
Thank you for having me, Martin. I appreciate it and looking forward to doing it again. Thank you.
Okay,